Here's my hot take. Edge of Eternities isn't very fun to draft. It's not just me. Edge of Eternities has had a pretty rough reception.
Oh, I tell you, man. This format is, I don't know what it is, but this is so far been an awful format for me.
What a stupid card. Come on! You know what I mean? Come on! Oh, this is so frustrating. What do you even do?
But no one seems to be able to agree why. Some people say it's too snowbally, but then other people say it's too swingy. Aggro is too strong, but somehow there's also too much removal. There's apparently too much variance, but you can also win just by playing any green creatures on curve. In fact, green is the best color, and so is black. Well, after hitting Mythic each month and drafting my way to an RC invite, I think I've figured out what is harshing the vibes of Edge of Eternities Limited. And I think it's embodied by this deck, right here. When a set has a flat power level, that means most cards exchange 1-for-1 with other cards. You can really see this with Edge of Eternity's common 2-drop creatures, which are all fairly bland designs that trade evenly with each other. Compare this to Final Fantasy, where cards like Sahagin, Dwarven Castle Guard, Town Greeter, and Undercity Dire Rat have stat lines that play out differently in different games. That's why stale board states are so common in Edge of Eternities. The vast majority of creatures aren't able to profitably attack or block in the early turns against opponents casting basically the same cards. When everything broadly trades 1-for-1, a card that offers 1.5-for-1 becomes stronger by comparison. Galactic Wayfarer, Virus Beetle, and Cryogen Relic offer modest card advantage compared to other recent sets, but they define this format due to that incremental value.
So if most of these cards trade 1-for-1 with each other, then why does the format feel so swingy?
It's because the high-CMC cards in this set are f***ing insane. Once you hit 4 mana, nearly every card worth playing offers a clean 2-for-1. Even crappy cards like the Warping Whale, bring a little bit of value as consolation. The cards that don't offer 2-for-1s have to make up for that by being thick. So thick. Look at all these 5/5s. Do you know how fast you lose the game once your opponent starts attacking you with 5/5s?
Oh yeah, it's very fast.
So the design team had to take special steps to ensure the format didn't just devolve into a bunch of 5/5s brawling on the battlefield, which is where our next problem comes in. See, if everyone were able to hit those land drops consistently, the format would just boil down to who has the most powerful top-end card. That's why you have to work so hard for your card advantage. If it were easy to draw cards, the only viable strategy would be to go bigger. At the same time, R&D needed to ensure that players could eventually cast these spells reliably. Most games of Limited are 8 to 10 turns long, meaning most players only see 15 or so cards from their deck. Not enough to consistently reach 7 mana. The solution? Landers. They aren't really card advantage because you only get lands from them, but they also aren't really ramp because it may be several turns before you can even safely activate them. But this combination of expensive cards and landers is precisely why there are so many reports of flooding and/or mana screw. See, landers don't meaningfully thin your deck. Your odds of drawing a land will be around 33%, even after cracking 2 or 3, so flooding out just happens. Unlike clues, which can potentially draw spells, or food, which can help you stay alive, lands are only as useful as the things they're casting. And having more than you need can feel miserable. That makes it sound like drawing cards is even more important than normal, but strangely, that's not true. In fact, Edge of Eternities works kind of like this. Board advantage is better than mana advantage, which is better than card advantage. That's why the Cab's drafting approach is better than normal in this format. There are big risks to consider when spending your mana on restocking your hand. That's a big part of why EOE is a tempo format.
How is this a tempo format if games are stalling out and going long?
Well, with powerful uncommons and rares that throw everything into chaos.
How do you put ward discard a card on a 2-drop? right? Like, how do you do that? With Menace, we're just dead.
If you're on the play and you curve out with 4 power creatures starting on turn 2, your opponent is doomed. There simply are not easy ways of regaining board control in this set, meaning your opponent needs to keep finding blockers or use multiple removal spells. Yes, there are a few Wraths in the set, but remember, most of the cards trade 1 for 1. That's why it's a tempo format, and that's why board advantage and being on the offensive is an effective strategy against decks trying to build up their mana in those early turns. It's also why Mana Screw is such a defining feature of this format. So is it even worth trying to get card advantage at all in this format? I first heard this term from Scuffle Deluxe, and I think it's a great descriptor of this set. Normally, when a set has multiple cards that work well with one another, we call that a synergy set. However, EOE is sort of the opposite. Some cards simply do not work effectively, unless you have the cards necessary to extract their full value. Consider Perigee Beckoner. If you cast it onto an empty board, it's just an expensive vanilla 4/5 creature. If you have another puzzle piece, like Virus Beetle, it becomes a card that lets you push through an extra couple damage. But once you have the third puzzle piece, a Sacrifice Enabler, the card becomes absolutely insane. So if you want to gain card advantage, you can't just play the 5-mana draw 3 and hope it works out. You've got to work for it a bit. Cryogen Relic and Hymn of the Faller both become 2 CMC divinations with the right sacrifice outputs. Umbral Collar Zealot enables absurd degeneracy, including a fringe but viable infinite combo. This is why so many people feel like they just don't get the format. You can't just draft good cards and hope to win, because you might be missing the key puzzle pieces that make your deck truly effective. Even worse, you may have had all the puzzle pieces in your deck, but failed to draw them in time against someone who seems to have all the answers.
I can just not win in this format. This deck was really good, I'm pretty sure. And again, maybe it's my fundamentals. Maybe this deck, I think it looks good and it's actually not, you know? I'm willing to believe that.
Which brings us to the next issue. Edge of Eternities is very much a snowball set. Once you take the advantage and keep it rolling, it's much easier for you to build onto that advantage than it is for your opponent to regain control. Spacecraft are one of the most consistent ways to break those dreaded board stalls, and cards like Sedge-class Siege Ship quickly end the game if unanswered. If your opponent is pressuring your life total though, they might as well be blank cardboard. That's why I think this deck is the perfect representation of what people dislike about Edge of Eternities. This is an extremely middling Gruul deck that plays almost entirely at sorcery speed and wants to curve out. It does not have any particularly powerful synergies, nor does it have much in the way of card advantage. It's boring as hell to play, and every game comes down to these 3 questions. 1. Am I curving out? 2. Is my opponent curving out? And 3. Do they have the puzzle pieces? If I curved out and they didn't, I won. If they curved out and I didn't, they won. If we both curved out and they found their puzzle pieces, they won. If they didn't find those cards, I won. The deck went 4-3. And that's where the vibes are the harshest. There is no good consistent strategy to embrace in this set. If you try to build around a consistent strategy, you're going to lose to the maniacs doing silly things with Caveron Turbo Drone or milling you with double space-time anomaly.
This is so dumb. Oh, yes! We just double space-time anomaly to blue-black control player, another Elegy Acolyte.
If you try to embrace the mania, you're going to lose to the luck of the draw.
Somehow they drew all of their amazing rares. I milled nothing good. And once again, I get absolutely crushed by Extinguisher Battleship.
But you know what? It's not exactly true. In fact, that's basically just how Magic is. You don't flood out more with landers. It just feels like you do. You still would have drawn too many lands without them, though. And every format involves getting run over or facing infinite removal sometimes. But EOE lays those flaws bare.
This is a really strong argument as to how fun Magic is, that this is, I think, the least fun I've had with a draft set in a couple years. Just, I don't know, all confluence of factors we've talked about. I don't really need to dredge it up. But I still was like, oh, this was a really fun set to play and draft. Magic is just awesome.
As tempting as it is to write this whole set off as being high variance, the truth is that it isn't really any more or less extreme than other sets. In fact, The games where both players are executing their game plans have been some of the most engaging and challenging games I've ever played. And there's an element of EoE that we haven't addressed yet: the flavor. Recent Magic sets have had extremely flavorful limited environments, with mechanics that feel true to the source material. The mechanics of Edge of Eternities are no different. Two opposing forces build up their share of land before engaging in devastating acts of war with giant weapons and spacecraft. From that perspective, the gameplay is actually a home run, capturing the feeling of making do in unfamiliar territory with limited resources. Unfortunately, though, the set is brought down by the fact that most of the cards we're casting just aren't very good. Although it can be fun to make bad cards good sometimes, I don't think it's a fun enough concept to uphold an entire set. Overall, though, I came around from strongly disliking this set to finding it moderately fun once things started to click. I'm not sorry to see it go, though. I'm sure the next set will have a much better draft environment. Oh, what the f***?